Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to The Cutting Room, the show where we talk to industry leading content marketers about their philosophy, process, and pregame before we talk about content marketing and edit an article live. In case you are new, and we have a lot of new faces to the show today, this is the premise. The first half hour of the show, we talk about all the philosophical things and all the things that make what makes content good. And then the second half, we do a live edit, and we will actually share with you in here the document itself, so you're able to follow along live. I'm very excited to have our guest on today. Her name is Erica Schneider. She has been absolutely incredible. A very varied career. She has started as a freelancer, moved over to agency side. Before that, she was doing English as a second language, like really, really cool stuff, and a huge advocate of editing and editorial and content quality as a whole. I've seen the edit that she's done of the document that I sent over to her, and I am beyond excited to have this conversation. So before we get into anything else, I just want to put a link out to the YouTube channel if you want to catch up on any previous episodes or anything like that. That'll be in the chat right here. Go ahead and check that out, subscribe, and you will be notified when new episodes and clips go out. All right, now, without any further ado, let us bring on Erica. What's happening, Erica? How are you?
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you very much. I figured, yeah, my coworkers were like, "Oh, you're doing this thing on your birthday." I was like, "Yeah, well, new experience, new year, you know?"
Yeah, I
Check that
love
off,
it. I love
off
it. What a
things
way
for
to
the rest of
kick
the year.
off.
Yeah.
What a way to kick off. I really appreciate you taking the time with us today. So, all right, cool. Don't like doing a whole lot of preamble. So, we're just going to jump straight into it. I would love to learn a little bit about your philosophy on content marketing and the effect that it can have on a business.
Yeah, that is a loaded question. So, in my mind, content marketing is relevant communication. And to take it a step further, I care so much about editorial quality that it's high quality, relevant communication. And I can get into what I mean by that in a minute. But um, essentially, it's meeting your audience where they are at the stage that's relevant to them in their customer journey, in the format that makes sense for where they're reading your content. So, content marketing traditionally, maybe it was you want to just put your stuff out there and have people notice you, but you're going to them. And now it's you want people to notice you and they're coming to you, they're talking about you, you're providing value in a way that actually educates, inspires, empowers, whatever adjective you want to throw in there. But it's relevant, top of all, relevant communication. And what I mean by high editorial quality is we're at the stage now where the top page one of the SERPs, they all look very similar because everyone's playing the keyword game,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a necessary evil until it isn't. It still is, but you don't have to regurgitate what everyone else is doing, and people are cottoning on to that. And so if you want to be credible and you want to build authority in the space, you have to be unique and connect with people in a way that keeps you top of mind. And the best way to do that is to put a lot of effort into editorial to make sure that even though you've done all the research, this is where your audience is, these are the plays that you need to make, like what you actually put out, the end product is good and it's unique and it's creative and it's different. It's worth talking about.
All right. So here's the $1 million question.
Mm-hmm.
What makes good content?
I mean, what makes good content? Okay, there's a lot of different layers to that question. First of all, obviously, what makes good content is if it speaks directly to your target audience. So, I despise one-liners that speak to everyone in the world and aren't, unique.
Yeah.
But as someone kindly pointed out to me in one of my first LinkedIn posts, well, presidents use them in their speech. What's wrong with that? Clearly it has a place. Okay, cool. Well, we're not the president. We're speaking to a target audience and we know who they are, if we've done our jobs. So good content speaks to your audience. It's specifically trying to accomplish whatever goal you have. So that's like the preamble to anything else I'm about to say. But editorially, it doesn't have filler. It's not redundant. It actually knows what a hook is and how to hook people. It's not over relying on stats. It's not quoting other articles and giving out backlinks when you don't need to. It structurally makes sense. When you're going through a narrative, I kind of picture like a weaving line. And if at any point you hit a speed bump, you're going to need to go back and reread, or you're just going to leave. So as you go through the line, it should be smooth, it should be nice, it should make sense from A to B, regardless of whether you're doing thesis, antithesis, solution, situation, challenge, answer, solution, whatever format you're using. There's no speed bumps. People get through it, they like it, they enjoy it, they engage with it, but also people skim. So again, it doesn't have to be that you expect everyone to read every single word on the page, but if they're skipping to the H2 that they're really looking for, that every single H2 needs to be like hitting it, have a hook, explain it, have an example if that makes sense, a takeaway, practical advice is a big one. I could go on.
It's funny. So when I talk about editorial and skimming in particular, it's every H2 is the opportunity to bring somebody back into the piece. The question that I have in that case, and we're not really talking about philosophy now, but maybe we can tie this back to philosophy, is when you're bringing somebody back into the piece, or constantly trying to bring somebody back into a piece, from a philosophical standpoint, what is it that you're looking at or thinking about as it relates to your reader and that intent and why they're there?
Yeah, so philosophically, I mean, H2s should tie benefits to outcomes. That's what we always say at Grizzle. So as they're skimming along, instead of just, what is this? It's a benefit. So do this to achieve X. And whatever that X is needs to be really relevant to what they're there for. So yeah, philosophically, people need to understand, okay, if I skip to this section, this is the outcome that I'm going to get, and I'm going to see exactly how to do it and why it's important.
Cool. You've got a whole lot of process stuff that I'm like itching to get into. We're actually going to we're going to get into this a little bit sooner than I think we normally do.
Okay.
The research process, getting to know the customer, getting to know the reader, meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? Because ideally, either your writer or you as the first reader are becoming a conduit for that sort of subconscious back of the head conversation that people are having. What does that process look like for you to find out what that is?
Yeah. So we're an agency. So from an agency viewpoint, like we do a lot of this work for the writer, but obviously if a freelancer is working with someone that doesn't have the capacity to do this, then they would have to do everything I'm about to say themselves. But the first and most important thing is to understand whoever you're writing for, what their goal is for the piece, and how they want to be represented in the market. So are they mission driven? Are they trying to grow, organically for brand reach? Are they trying to generate leads, mainly from email signups or landing page conversions? Whatever that goal is, start there. The next step is to have conversations with subject matter experts themselves. So whether that's someone that works at the company of the product or service that you're writing about, so that they can tell you specifically what they feel they have created the product or service for, or if it's one of their customers, so that you can understand what they bought into the product or service for. And that helps you understand everybody's outcome. And obviously the audience's outcome is way more important than what the brand wants to do. It always has to lead with the audience.
One of the things that I like to do when we do the research on the search results in particular, for reverse engineering that side, is I'll take handwritten notes on what some people are saying, what other people aren't, and like find those gaps where nobody's saying this, but then use what I can find through like social media chatter, Reddit posts, things like that to sort of fill in those gaps and better meet that intent. can you kind of go into, I know you were starting to talk about this until the audio cut out, but
Mhm.
can we jump off of that and what that sort of reader research is looking like before you write the piece or get into the piece?
Yeah, absolutely. So the reader research is everything, honestly. So as much as I care about editorial, like I care equally about making sure that you are uncovering what you want to talk about as much as I do about talking about it well. So to me, they're equally as important. I feel like this is just from personal experience. I might be wrong, but from what I've seen, there's an oversaturation of people that are experts in the strategy side of things, which is so great. It's so important, but there's not an oversaturation of experts in the editorial side of things. And to me, they're two parts that go like this. One can't exist without the other.
Right.
So anyway, so yeah, so you're uncovering those conversations, those gaps, just like you were talking about. If it's an SEO play, you'll reverse engineer the SERPs, see what keywords you want to go for. But then the goal as well. So, if it's a mission driven brand trying to change the conversation, the way that you're going to structure your piece is going to be different than if it's a brand that is already kind of known in the space and they just want to generate more sales. So, that's where the strategy side of things comes into play. But yeah, specifically, I can give a specific example with one of our clients. It was in a space where feedback isn't necessarily valued, but their tool is a feedback tool, to not go into too many details. And I found that nobody was talking about that. And so not only were they somewhat unique in their tool, but even their competitors weren't really talking about the thought leadership behind a thing. There was a lot of how to execute a thing, but there wasn't a thought leadership play. So our strategy for them was to create super original thought leadership pieces that also tapped into the strategy in the second half of the draft. And that was how that started, for example.
Okay, cool. And you kind of mentioned, and this was something that I thought was neat because you've been talking about, the sort of, I don't really know the word I'm looking for here, and I deal with words for a living, right? But
Happens
the
all
sort
the
of
time.
sameness that starts to happen in the search results,
Hmm.
right? If you're like, I think one of the most important parts for an editor, and we actually had this conversation with Ryan McCready a few weeks back, is to bring that unique point of view, right? How do you get rid of the sameness and create a signal
Hmm.
amongst all the other noise that's out there that sort of makes everything look identical?
Yeah. So it's hard. It's hard because you still have to satisfy the robots. So you still are trying to go for that snippet. It's not easy to make a creative snippet. I mean, nor would you want to. So it's uh, so weird. I posted about storytelling on my LinkedIn today.
Yes,
This is
yes.
so overused, and we need to like bring the value behind what that word means back into context. Storytelling is a really interesting way to do it. So there's obviously different ways to do storytelling. There's the art of storytelling, which is to use storytelling throughout your content. And then there's business storytelling, where businesses are literally creating stories, like mini movies, something that you would imagine as a story. And
Hmm.
they're using that to implicitly connect with people rather than explicitly connect with them. And so if you're doing an SEO play and you're trying to stand out in the SERPs, a great way is to use storytelling in your introduction. So if you're writing about, for example, the piece that we're going to go through today was about pricing strategies. Instead of saying, pricing strategies uh, depend on your audience and your competition, we're going to talk through what those are. And it's important to get it right, which is basically what most of them say. You could start with a story. You could find either a B2B or B2C brand, whoever your audience is, and find a success or a failure when it came to pricing, and start with that. So X brand, um, when they launched, they set their pricing to this, and they either succeeded or they failed. And you're kind of anecdotally backed up by data and stats. Obviously, you can't just riff on this. Explaining what happened. And that's an interesting way to stand out and kind of hook people in, to get them to imagine themselves as making that mistake or overcoming that challenge. And that's a really, really, you know, authentic way that is super relatable to everyone, that gets them imagining themselves in that role, and then they want to keep scrolling. So that's just one of the ways. Yeah.
I love it. Now, if we zoom out, right, because we can look at that on a piece by piece or campaign by campaign basis and like video by video, like you can look at that individual story as a whole. But if we zoom out a little bit and we're telling the broader story of the brand and the
Hmm.
editorial calendar that we're planning and all of this other stuff,
Hmm.
how are you looking at that? Like, how are you telling the story over a longer period of time?
Yeah, that's harder, obviously. So a good way to do that is to inject um, literal anecdotes or advice or examples from either the founders or the people that work for them themselves, throughout your content. So if you're making a point that pricing strategies, um, are important to figure out before you just choose a price, then you can talk about your own experience with pricing strategies,
Hmm.
for example, at your own business. Yeah, it's finding that way of sort of bringing your anecdotal evidence into it to not only, like I said before, help people see themselves in it, but help them get to know you better, without necessarily being like, here's our story, like watch this 10-minute video of us. You're sort of giving little nuggets throughout, which is interesting, can be interesting.
I, I think what's cool about that, and something that I try to think about when it comes to this too, is thinking about what's somebody going to want to know after
Hmm.
pricing, pricing strategies and product pricing in this case, and then what's
Hmm.
somebody going to want before that, and how can we start to foreshadow what's going to come next and anticipate that because we've done the research, and really have those conversations both with the internal subject matter experts and with the
Yeah.
actual people who are going to be doing this and da 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 da. So let's see here. I want to learn a little bit more about your pregame. Let's talk about the pregame before you jump into an edit.
Hmm.
And I would like to just encourage anybody here who has any questions. Please feel free to ask in the chat. This is a live format. Let's take advantage of that, and feel free to ask any questions along the way. All right, pregame.
Okay. So I'm a huge advocate for detailed briefs and outlines. So
Okay.
this was actually completely new to me because there was no outline here and I didn't know who the audience was. And so a lot of my feedback could change based on those factors. So the pregame is familiarizing myself, if I haven't done it myself, with the brief, um, and the outline. And the brief has, a competitive analysis of what else is happening in the SERPs, an angle that we want to take to stand out, be unique, be different, fill in gaps in value, opportunities that we can mention the product, add stories, all that good stuff. Any secondary keywords that need to be included, and then the outline itself. So that's usually, I like looking at the structure of the piece in outline format before looking at a finished piece in outline format, because as we'll see in a minute, I totally reworked how this piece was presented. And that's something that I would have caught in the outline phase. And it's easier when you're looking at one page instead of, 15,
Mm-hmm.
to do that. It just takes a lot less time. So I'm a huge advocate of the outline. In terms of actually getting ready, mindset is a huge thing. So I'm another, I think I made up this word, but I call it context switching. So it's something that editors and writers need to do if they work with more than one client. So you have to not only represent your client on the page, you have to become them. Sometimes you're even writing in first person. So um, there's an element of acting involved, and I am by no means an actor at all. But um, it's getting into the mindset of who that person is, and so in order to do that, I will always read a blog or two of theirs before I hop into it to just familiarize myself with their tone of voice. If they have any videos that they put out where they're speaking, or someone that represents their brand tone or voice is speaking, I'll watch something like that. I mean, I'm talking like 5 minutes, but just to get into their voice and tone, because you are representing them, and going in without doing that is a risk, because you might make a subconscious change based on your preferences, but those have very little to do with their preferences usually, and there is room for pushback, of course. But yeah, so I get into the mindset, I look at the outline, I know what we're trying to achieve, and then I open up the draft, I have the outline next to me, and I dig in.
Would you be able to share one of the outline templates that you're using, or the frameworks that you're using afterwards? Because
Yeah.
we love those over here.
Sure.
And if I'm understanding that correctly too, it's almost like a meditative practice. Don't let me put words into your mouth, but it's almost like a meditative practice once you're ready to get into the edit, so you can take everything that you've brought on from that client in this case, to bring that forward. Right?
Yeah, I have to say, one of the most common edits that I make after a freelancer submits a draft is, the client wouldn't say it like this, or this isn't their tone. And so obviously we have client guidelines that we share as well, but I don't know if people remember to read them every single time. But really, it's like stretching before you go do a workout. Honestly, like, you don't want to pull a muscle. And so you have to get yourself warmed up. And if you skip this step, like, not only are you going to get the tone of voice wrong, or the angle or whatever else is in the brief, you might miss the mark, but you're creating tons of work for either the editor or yourself, future self, if they kick it back to you for a round of feedback. So it's really like 10 to 15 minutes of, meditational mindset setting at first, saves you tons of time.
Now, as an editor, how are you? This is a tricky one, because a lot of our viewers are content leads, right? How are you trying to communicate that sort of, that voice that you're trying to go after, that sort of vibe, right? It's something that's kind of intangible.
Yeah.
How are you taking that and putting it into words?
So we always have a target audience section in our brief as well, where we explain
Okay.
what they're about. But we also have a reference content section in our brief, where not only do we add internal links, but we'll specifically say, the way that they explain this in this link is really interesting. Read that for inspiration, something like that. So we try to give them
Gotcha.
as many assets as we can, before we ask them to then go and like morph into this person or this brand.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And like, it sounds like you're really taking some time to invest in the author themselves too, right? Like,
Yeah, we
what's
take tons
that?
of time. Yeah.
Yeah, tell me about that. Tell me what that sort of like writer development process looks like for you,
Mm.
and how that sort of works, because obviously you don't want to have one and done relationships with like a single freelancer and just
Yeah.
have it sit turnaround. Tell me
So
about that. What's your writer development process like?
yeah, so just to zoom out for a second, so I was talking a lot about how I care about editorial quality, and how I want people in like the content strategy roles to care as much about editorial, but I also want to revolutionize from the inside, right? So the people that are producing this are often freelancers. And if they are not hearing constructive criticism or pushback, or if they're not being invested in to help them improve, they're just getting cycled around, like, oh, this wasn't good, sorry, bye. And then they
Yep.
go, they get hired by someone else, and they're not learning, right? And so it's like it's like a top and bottom, like, I want to like the revolution from both sides, essentially. And so we invest a lot in them. We have a pilot process that we pay for, and in that pilot, I will start to give them feedback that they'll likely see from us once they get hired, so that they're used to it. And that's a good chance for them to be like, this is great, I'm excited, like, you guys are super constructive and I want to learn, or this is too much for me. And that's a really good chance, because we want people that are hungry and that want to improve their writing. And we want people that want to produce valuable work, not just get paid for putting words on a page,
I think that's important, and that's like because I was at Shopify for a very long time, and I was over on the editorial side on the enterprise division, and I was like, it's an investment, right? It
Yeah.
really is an investment. It's a trust-based relationship, and it's one where you have to like it's emotional. It is almost emotional because you're judging the quality of somebody's thoughts and interpretation of certain facts and research and data and all of this other stuff. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things. Like there is a huge level of vulnerability, and um, so here's a better question for you. How are you going about pattern breaking? Because obviously, like any relationship, people are bringing their baggage into it.
Hmm.
How do you go about breaking those patterns to better serve your clients?
Yeah. So we front load constructive feedback. And until recently, a lot of that feedback was ad hoc, but we actually just started creating internal courses that we're sending our writers through as well. So we're kind of, you know, preempting them for what we're going to say so that they're prepared for it. And then we'll just keep, telling them throughout. But the idea and what's worked for us is that you front load feedback. You put hours into not only leaving comments like I did today, but sending detailed notes afterwards saying, I left a lot of comments in the draft, but this is our high level feedback. Here's what you did well. Here's where I think you can improve. Like, watch out for this, this, and this. And until I watched, I think I mentioned I watched a couple of these before I came on. I watched the one where I think it was Margaret from
Yeah.
Airtable, and she has this amazing like quality scorecard for writers that we might start using a version of that ourselves, because that's amazing, because a lot of the feedback is sort of piece by piece and ad hoc, but it's super important for writers to not only see, oh, you did well here, or this piece was kind of, you could do better, but to see like a steady improvement. Ideally, if we're doing our job right, the line will be going like this, and they'll see that they're improving. And we want them to obviously work with us as long as they can, but if they want to go out into the world, I want them to feel like we've empowered them to be like epic writers wherever they go.
Yeah, it's job security for them, and
Hmm.
it's like consistency and reliability on your part. So like I think that's incredible. All right, so we are at the 5:28 for me. Let's tell me a little bit about your pregame. We're gonna jump straight into the article here in just a second.
Hmm.
First thing you do before you jump into the article, you clear your mind, you get into the mindset, you stop context switching and focus in. What comes next?
So the first thing I'll do is I will skim read to make sure that if you've got the outline next to me, that the H2s actually follow the order of operations that makes the most sense. And that, of course, depends on your strategy and how you want to present your arguments, if you're going for an SEO play or not. So I'll do a skim. And then I will pop back up to the top and spend a lot of time on the introduction, because obviously that's where people make or break, whether they're going to keep reading or leave. And then honestly, I know a lot of people tend to go and do like high level edits first. I sort of dive in. That's my process. It might take me a bit longer, but for example, today I skimmed it. I thought this is kind of out of place, but I need to read it in detail to understand how this is out of place and how I can fix it. And in so doing, I realized, okay, there's absolutely no need for this. Like, let's move this up here. And I did all of that rejigging after I line edited the introduction and a bit of the first section. And then
Hmm.
from there, like once it's structurally in the right place, I go into line editing.
Nice.
So yeah. And then
All right.
obviously, yeah, let's do it.
Let's jump into your screen. We're also going to share the article in the chat here, so anybody who wants to follow along absolutely can. If you can share your screen, bring it up. we can see just how much has been done here. All right, perfect. And there we go.
Should I
All
zoom in?
right. Nope. I think you actually. It looks fine on my part. Audience, how's it looking for you? I think we might be okay. I think if you do need us to zoom in, perfect. Okay, cool. All right, let's
Cool.
jump in.
Okay. So this is where I left like high level comments. And I sort of rewrote the intro and then I left a couple comments throughout. So we're going to start here, but then here's where I sort of copy pasted everything to make it make more sense strategically. And I rewrote the first H2. And then from here is where I started making line edit comments. And then I didn't have time to get down to the final one. But yeah, so that's, I think we should start here and then we can dive into it. So, I mean, first sentence, there's no need for this whatsoever. This is not a great hook. It doesn't inspire me to read more. So also, I just want to make a caveat that I was working really quickly. So some of these comments might be a little brutal. I usually try to be a bit nicer in my tone, but also keep in mind what I said before. Usually we send like a wrap up with like a whole bunch of positive feedback first before we're like, by the way, we left a lot of comments. So hopefully.
Yeah, no, we like brutal. It's all good.
So,
you can be brutal. The
right.
more brutal and unfiltered, the better.
Cool. So yeah, not a great hook. Could be the opener to literally any topic, cut. So just totally unnecessary. Moving on to the second sentence, product pricing matters more to the business owner than to the customer. So again, like that's a really generalized statement that's not necessarily true in all instances. And also think about the intent behind this. Who's looking for product pricing and specifically product pricing strategies? It's not someone that needs to hear something that they already know. So my comment here is just about how, you know, also it says that it matters more to the business owner than the customer. I understand what this person is trying to say, but I would say pricing matters a whole lot to a customer. So it just feels a bit jarring. And so I made the point that the better argument would be that customers care if the price aligns with the perceived value. So to get it right, you need a pricing strategy that takes this into account so you can achieve X or Y. Yes, people comparison shop, but strong brands get away with selling similar or identical products for higher prices or better margins. So here, not only is this obvious probably to the reader, but you know, we're making somewhat of a contextual argument before we've set the context. So what is a strong brand and why do they get away with it? You don't want to leave the reader asking these questions or wondering, you know, why are you saying this thing that feels like it's coming from out of nowhere before you've set me up to take this information in. And then I made a comment about how there's really no need to give someone a backlink when it's not necessary. If you want, in my mind, this feels like laziness. You know, oh, strong brands, like here's a link, go read what a strong brand is. Like the idea with backlinks is it's something that absolutely needs to be there because it adds more value that you can't add yourself, or you truly is not relevant, so there's no need to have it. Or it's a data-backed resource that needs to be there, or it's an internal link. Otherwise, I personally don't see the point. If you want to explain what a strong brand is, then, or if you're going to bring that up, you should explain it in your own words. So this is a fun one. This is good news. People say this all the time. This is filler. This is filler. It's filler. Why? Why are we saying this? It just doesn't make sense. It's like adding, these are the speed bumps I'm talking about. It's adding friction to the reader. Also, it doesn't really make sense. Strong brands get away with selling similar or identical products for higher price points. So this is good news. What if I'm not a strong brand? What if I'm literally starting from scratch and I want to know how to do product pricing? This is no longer speaking to me. Obviously, you're talking to strong brands. Like I'm going to go Google something else because this is not for me. So I would cut that. Since you don't have to rush to the bottom on price. So my comment here was, what do you mean by this? Sweeping generalizations, which is what this is, don't sit well in introductions because they require context, and intros need to be short and snappy to get people to keep scrolling. So this is actually a pricing strategy, not, you know, which they get into earlier. throwing it in here just confuses things. Realistically, business success isn't just about numbers and margins. Again, obvious filler. I think anyone that runs a business knows that it's not just about the numbers and margins. So it's just not necessary. If this sentence were to stay, I would cut it to, you know, pricing strategy relies on strong brand positioning, understanding your customers, your product's market status, and your market as a whole. If you were going to say a sentence like that, which is incredibly obvious for an introduction. I don't really know what happened here. This is H2 content. This in my opinion doesn't belong anywhere in an introduction. It's starting to get into the weeds again when you haven't properly set context. So anything that's like a bulleted list where you where it begs for more context, I would say always leave out of the introduction. Another one, clearly there are multiple factors at play. There's no need for it. Filler, remove it. It's a speed bump. People don't need to know what they know. So I understand when you're drafting, because I do this as well, that these sentences just kind of come out of you, oh, like I just listed these 10 things, like, whoa, that's a lot. Clearly that's a lot. Get it out of your system and then cut it. It doesn't need to be there. Given the importance of product pricing on cash flow, I don't believe cash flow was mentioned. I assume that they believe this all equals cash flow, but it wasn't really explicitly defined. And then it's a subject that should be given proper attention. You already said that. You have to consider a number of factors. It deserves this and that. Again, this is just repetition. It's redundant, remove. This is why. These are 3 words that don't need to be there. Cut it. Just start with in this guide. Okay, so this transition will explore the art and science involved in calculating and setting different prices for your products, review various pricing strategies that influence your customer base's purchase decisions, and discuss when to adjust your product pricing as your business evolves. This is a lot of words. And it's nice that it explains what's going to be in the draft, but it's not tied to any specific outcome. What is the person that is reading this going to learn? What are they going to get from this piece? It's the same logic with the headers, tie benefits to outcomes. So a list of potential outcomes you could have pulled from here would have been get your pricing strategy right, and you can get more sales, have a higher ROI, grab more of the market share, improve loyalty, have a longer customer lifetime value. Anything. I mean, there's 1,000 outcomes here that you could pull from that are more interesting than here's what's going to be in this guide. And if you feel like you need to do something like this, then add a table of contents. If that's in your client's guidelines, they can just see what's in the guide without you having to tell them what's about to be in the guide. So cool. So here I took a stab at a new intro and then an alt new intro. And the reason being is I don't understand here the audience, or the strategy. So this is an introduction that does not use storytelling, and in the alt new intro sort of gave how you could tell a story here. So I'll just read the new intro out loud and then explain why I wrote it this way. Okay, so value is nebulous, and cheap or expensive doesn't exist without competition. So right away we're speaking to the intent, which is how much should you charge for new products, and then immediately explaining kind of a friction that you have with it. What is value? What is cheap? What is expensive? Oh, okay, it doesn't exist without the competition. That's an example. That's a sign that the competition is important to come. So we've already sort of said something without saying you need to rely on competition. It's like it's a subtle way of giving advice. That's kind of interesting. So where to start? Product pricing strategies help you find the sweet spot between growing your bottom line, establishing market share, and sending the right message to customers. So again, you have to you got to get the keyword in there if this is an SEO play. But this is sort of a more interesting way to say it than, products pricing strategy is this, this and this. To uncover the right pricing strategy, you need to dig into your competition and audience. How much are your competitors charging? How are they communicating the value behind price? And how should you do the same with your audience? In this article, we'll share common product pricing models and strategies that help you maximize profits while meeting consumer demand. There's a live edit. So reading this, it's still somewhat generic in the sense that it's not telling a story, or there's no anecdotes in here. And it doesn't rely on data, which can be interesting if the data is unique rather than something that everyone links to. But it really attacks like what the problems and pain points are right out of the gate, and gives advice without explicitly saying, you know, you need to do all of these things. And it's short and snappy. So yeah, here's an alternative new introduction if you're into storytelling. And I think I mentioned this before. So find a B2B or B2C example where a brand got pricing really, really right or really, really wrong, and tell that story. So for example, when brand launched their product in year, they priced high or low based on reason. The result, add the outcome. For example, they barely sold anything, lost money, and had to go back to the drawing board. After realizing their product strategy didn't align with what the competition was doing and messaging didn't explain the value behind price points, and then how they pivoted. So that's another way to sort of grab people in with a story. It does the same thing in a different format. So yeah, should I pause for questions or just kind of keep going through this?
I would love if anybody in the audience has any questions to come up, because I love the snappiness, even on the generic side. I love the snappiness of your rewrite there. So yeah, anyone in the audience, please feel free to ask any questions here. And while we're waiting, if you want to bring up, because you had said you had done sort of a restructure and a rewrite, I would actually be curious to know about the structure, your thoughts on the structure as you saw it, and then what your restructure ended up looking like.
Yeah, cool. Am I still sharing my screen?
You are, but right now I'm
okay,
I'm focused on you.
Got it. Okay, so this first headline really, at first I was giving very high level feedback. You know, you should tie this to an outcome. And then as I kept reading, it ended up being, and as you can see, you know, 30 minutes passed between here and there. So my process is to sort of read and then think and go, wait a second, that doesn't work. If this is about product pricing, which generally, if you Google that keyword, most of the SERPs are talking about strategies. Why are we talking about accounting principles? And I understand the need to touch on them on a very basic level. But if you scroll through the first couple H2s, you know, we've got some pretty intense formulas here that you would see in like a complete guide to accounting, essentially. And it was just a bit jarring. I felt like I was reading through the wrong topic. It just didn't make sense, especially with even before the edited intro. You know, the intro is telling you, it's talking about pricing strategies. Strong brands can sell similar identical products for higher prices. So if we're going to be talking about the strategy of the thing, we should really satisfy that intent before we get into nitty gritty stuff like this. And honestly, I don't think that this belongs in here at all. So my process then, once I realized that this was kind of backwards, was to skim through and find where this person actually gets into strategies, which did not happen until all the way here, down here, sort of. This is about competition. Here, cool. Article should start with this, move up. This is really interesting. You know, this now gets into the common strategies, but moving this up without setting context would also be wrong. So that's where you can see, if we come to here, I essentially added the necessary context, which is all of this, before we got into those models. And what I basically did with this text is briefly mention those accounting things that took up, I mean, I'm actually really curious. I think it was so many pages of accounting principles, and I condensed them into 258 words. So this is the perfect example of how an outline can help, and how getting your thoughts down before you start writing is super important. It felt like this person was Googling things as they went and just adding every single thing they found. And refining this is about saying more with less. You don't need to have 3,822 words to make something valuable when half of this is not related necessarily to it. And then this edit right now is 1865, but with the feedback I've given, it would probably go up to like 2,300. So it would still be pretty decent length, but it hits on the intent better. So
That
yeah,
is so fantastic. And I cannot wait to share the before and after in the follow up. We do have a couple of questions here.
nice.
Tom says,
Tom.
how'd you go about finding those stories and examples to inject into the intro?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Tom. I work with Tom. So um, Tom, that's a great question. So a great way to go about finding those stories is to go to Google and, again, like, reverse engineer the SERPs. So obviously you want to see what people are talking about as well. So you want to see what people are mentioning. You don't want, this is interesting, I ran into this the other day, you don't want to be quoting the same story that everyone else is quoting, because that dilutes the value as well, doesn't it? If everyone is seeing the same story. So you want to go into communities, go on LinkedIn, go on Twitter, go on Quora, go on Reddit, Google, B2B brands that had great product pricing, B2B brand product pricing fails. Do all of those things and dig into examples that people have shared themselves, linked to anecdotal examples that you could potentially reach out to someone and be like, I found your story really interesting. Could I get a quote from you about this? And that's another way to sort of inject storytelling without having to tell the whole story. So Tom, I hope that answers your question.
It and are you also kind of thinking about that narrative in advance? Like, you kind of have an idea of the story you want to tell before you tell it?
That depends. It depends on what you uncover in the research. And again, like, that also depends so much on what you're trying to achieve and like what resonates with your
Mm,
audience. So if this is a not this example, but if there was a brand that was mission driven, then obviously you would have in your mind that you want to find other brands that did something well or not in that mission driven mindset. This is a bit more difficult because everybody, regardless of who they are, has to deal with product pricing.
mm.
So it's a lot larger at scale. Again, it depends on if the audience is B2B, B2C, and where they are at in their journey, whether they're small, just starting out, or pivoting. And if their audience, if there's competitors in the space, what the market looks like, and if their audience is receptive to some of the pricing models that we're about to get into or not.
All right. We have another question here too, which is, must I always write a conclusion for articles?
Ah, okay. Yes, but not in the typical way. So conclusions are another big problem editorially. They are not meant to be like in this article, like, or as you can see, we've talked about these things in this article. So I hope you, take these things and learn from it. Yes, but the answer is yes. You need to wrap up everything that you're saying in a way that feels like it's the end. But you should say something in a conclusion that mirrors what you've said throughout, but in a different way. So if you mentioned a story in the introduction, for example, and then you talked about all these other examples throughout, then a conclusion is a great place to Tie your learnings from all of those examples and takeaways into a conclusion. It should be not a summary, but a final argument. If that makes sense.
See, I have maybe a contrarian opinion on that.
Hmm.
And we'll jump on screen together.
Sure.
So what I like about one of the things I think about conclusions that are not usually done very well
Hmm.
is the conclusion. Like it very much is. It says conclusion right at the end, and then it's that. What I
Hmm.
think a conclusion can be, and this is more from an energy perspective of the writing itself, is something that inspires you to do something more, right? It's something that if you're talking about how to do a thing, the conclusion for me is always like, all right, now let's get you amped up to go do this thing, not just let it be another piece of information inside your head.
Totally.
That has its place. It's not the only thing, obviously, but
Yeah.
I think the problem is, and this is just the sort of business advice 101 that everybody tells you, is the like, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
Hmm.
And that gets so like ingrained in our behavior
Yeah.
as both writers and as editors too, really, um, where it can make it so the whole thing just falls kind of flat
I agree.
overall.
Like I said, if you're going on this journey, like the introduction, it's not meant to be like this. Like you don't go like this and then get back to your introduction at the end. Like it's a journey. So
Yeah.
you're wrapping up your arguments, and yeah, you're definitely pushing them to do something, book a call, sign up for this thing, like read this other article that we wrote. Or, even something like, there's a bunch of other stories that are interesting. Like, I recommend go check out this, and this. Obviously, it would be better if it was something that you produced that you could link to, but something that's different and valuable that leads them to something, whether that's something that has to do specifically with your brand or something that you've made them think about that they're going to go do, part of your
Yeah.
mission.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, like the goal is to drive some sort of change,
Yeah.
right? You want some sort of change within your reader or your viewer. Otherwise, nothing is going to happen.
Yeah.
So, as you're telling this story, even if it's not a story, right? The story that they're telling themselves as they're going through it, right? Either in a piece by piece basis or over a longer period of time, ideally both. It's something that you want to help them inspire change within themselves, which usually
Absolutely.
that change, the impetus for that change is by our product, right?
Right.
Like you
Right.
can't get there without this.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
cool. Well, we have a few more minutes left here. I would love just sort of, I mean, we told them what we were going to tell them. We told them. I'd love just some parting thoughts here on everything we've talked about so far, and some words of wisdom.
Yeah. So, good writing is hard, obviously, to get right, but it's worth the effort, is I think the biggest takeaway that I want people to have. So that means that you have to kick out bad habits and learn some new ones by people like us. Or hopefully, this in my mind is hopefully going to help inspire other content creators or strategists to bring editorial quality into the conversation more than I think it is now. And so there's, I wrote some top editing phrases down in a doc. I'm just going to read these out. I can share this as well. These are, I just kind of compiled the most used feedback that I give to writers. And if writers can know that this is coming and get ahead of it, and if editors can also look out for these things, I think that the quality bar can be raised. And I think that people will start to get excited. People, as in marketers ourselves, but our audience will get more excited in reading the content that we put out, because they know that it's going to be credible and unique and interesting, as opposed to all the fluff that really is like rampant. So here's some phrases. This is redundant. No need to say it again. What are you trying to say? Say that instead. Why does this matter? How can I do this? You've made this point already. Specific outcomes are better than generalizations. Fluff, cut. Not sure this is necessary. Start where you get into the real advice. And what does this sentence or idea or takeaway look like? And so I think the meaning behind all of that is, what's the practical value that we're giving to people here? You know, what are we doing that's gonna keep us top of mind, that's gonna answer questions, and that's not gonna sound like every other thing? Like, what about your brand is going to make people think that you're someone worth listening to, that your content is worth reading, and all of that ideally leads to them wanting to interact with you, engage with you, buy from you. So yeah, I think we can all collectively do a better job with editorial quality and prioritizing that.
Erica, thank you so much for coming on. I had
Thanks
a
for having
blast
me.
with this conversation, and I look forward to sending out the things in the follow-up. Yes, yeah, that was absolutely, it was incredible. Um, if you want to have the replay, we will be sending the replay out tomorrow, along with some takeaways, some of the additional resources that Erica has put on here. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of the night. Tune in next week. We have another great guest coming on, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.